Young, and the Restless spoilers. The episode unfolds with an undercurrent of unease that never fully recedes, beginning with a confrontation that feels less like a clash of words and more like a collision of long-buried truths. Kane Ashby stands face to face with Adam Newman, the air between them heavy with distrust, their shared history coloring every look and pause. Kane is no stranger to manipulation or corporate warfare, but this moment is different, sharpened by fear rather than ambition. Somewhere beyond this confrontation, Lily Winters and her twins are unreachable, their sudden disappearance from the digital grid setting off alarms that logic alone cannot quiet. Adam, for his part, maintains a measured composure that borders on provocation, insisting that whatever is happening has not come directly from him, but from higher authority. The mention of Victor Newman's name does not soothe Kane's suspicions, it intensifies them. Victor's influence has always operated in shadows, and Kane knows better than to accept surface-level reassurances when his family's safety is at stake. The loss of network connectivity may sound benign on paper, but Kane understands that silence is often the first step toward something far more dangerous. Running parallel to this confrontation is a quieter, more intimate exchange that may prove just as explosive. Claire Grace Newman meets with Sienna Bacall under circumstances that seem casual on the surface but are charged with unspoken tension. Sienna, poised yet visibly unsettled, reveals that she is preparing to return to Los Angeles, framing the decision as practical and inevitable. Claire listens closely, her sharp instincts immediately sensing that there is more beneath the explanation than Sienna is willing to articulate. The conversation shifts naturally toward Noah Newman, whose name alone complicates the air between them. When Claire asks what Sienna's departure means for her relationship with Noah, the response is hesitant, almost rehearsed. Sienna suggests that Noah might go with her, a possibility that should sound reassuring but instead lands awkwardly, as though it is being offered to close off further questioning rather than invite it. Claire's unease grows not from what Sienna says, but from how she says it. There is a subtle contradiction in Sienna's demeanor, a push and pull that does not align with the idea of a couple moving forward together. Claire notices that while Sienna speaks of leaving, her body language betrays reluctance, and when Noah's potential involvement comes up, Sienna's tone shifts again, almost as if she hopes the subject will drop. This is what triggers Claire's suspicion most sharply. If Sienna truly wanted Noah by her side, there would be certainty, not hesitation. Claire presses gently but firmly, asking why Sienna seems conflicted, why she appears to want Noah to stay behind even as she prepares to leave. The question hangs between them, exposing a fault line Sienna has tried hard to conceal. Her discomfort becomes more pronounced, her answers less precise, and Claire begins to piece together the possibility that Sienna's plans are not about distance or opportunity, but about avoidance. As Claire processes this exchange, she cannot shake the feeling that Sienna is protecting someone, or perhaps protecting herself from a truth she is not ready to face. The implications ripple outward, touching Noah's future and raising questions about loyalty, honesty, and fear. Claire's curiosity is no longer casual, it is investigative, rooted in the understanding that secrets rarely exist in isolation. If Sienna is lying or withholding something now, it may be connected to far larger forces at play, forces that have already begun to disrupt the lives of everyone connected to the Newman orbit. Meanwhile, Kane's confrontation with Adam escalates, driven by desperation rather than posturing. Kane demands answers, not about business deals or power plays, but about the safety of Lily and their children. Adam's insistence that he is merely following Victor's directives does little to deflect Kane's anger. The distinction between executor and architect means nothing when the outcome is the same. Adam claims he is not acting as Victor's guardian or enforcer in the way Kane imagines, attempting to draw a line between obedience and responsibility. To Kane, this distinction feels like a semantic game, one designed to obscure accountability. He challenges Adam directly, asking what kind of twisted game is being played, what purpose is served by isolating Lily and the twins, even temporarily. The tension peaks when the conversation turns from suspicion to implication. Adam's controlled demeanor falters just enough to suggest that he knows more than he is willing to admit, or at least more than he is allowed to reveal. Kane recognizes this hesitation as confirmation that something is deeply wrong. Network outages do not happen in a vacuum, and Victor Newman does not move pieces without intent. Kane's mind races through possibilities, each darker than the last, as he considers the lengths Victor has gone to in the past to secure leverage. The thought that Lily and the twins could be pawns in a larger strategy ignites a fury that Kane struggles to contain. He is no longer willing to accept partial truths or carefully worded denials. Adding another layer of unease is a subtle but chilling moment involving Dominic Newman, Abbot Winter's chancellor, whose presence looms over the episode not through action, but through implication. A seemingly innocent remark or suggestion about the father introduces ambiguity that unsettles everyone who hears it. In a world already riddled with secrets, Dominic's words feel like a spark near dry tinder, hinting at unresolved questions of identity and lineage. Whether intentional or accidental, the suggestion opens the door to speculation that could destabilize multiple families at once. The timing is impossible to ignore, arriving just as trust fractures along several fault lines. By the episode's end, the narrative threads converge into a shared sense of impending crisis. Claire walks away from her conversation with Sienna carrying more questions than answers. Her suspicions sharpening into concern that whatever Sienna is hiding may soon come to light in ways that affect Noah profoundly. Kane leaves his confrontation with Adam no closer to reassurance, his fear for Lily and the twins evolving into a grim determination to uncover the truth. Regardless of whose authority he must challenge. Adam, caught between loyalty to Victor and the growing consequences of obedience, stands isolated, aware that the shield of plausible deniability is wearing thin. What makes these developments especially unsettling is not the overt drama, but the quiet realization that multiple forms of control are being exerted simultaneously. Emotional control through secrecy, technological control through isolation, and psychological control through fear and uncertainty. Each character senses that they are being maneuvered, yet no one can see the full board. The episode closes not with resolution, but with the unmistakable feeling that something has already gone wrong, and that the answers, when they finally surface, may shatter relationships that were already fragile. In Genoa City, danger does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it arrives as silence, hesitation, and a single question that refuses to go away. Tessa Porter could feel the dread building long before she ever stepped into Sharon Newman's orbit, a creeping, suffocating sense that something in her life had slipped out of alignment without her fully understanding how or when it had happened. It had begun with small things that were easy to dismiss at first, messages from Mariah that sounded a little too clipped. Video calls where her eyes seemed to flick off screen as if she were listening to someone else, pauses so long that the silence between them became its own kind of answer. Tessa tried to rationalize it, telling herself that stress, exhaustion, and the pressures of motherhood could twist anyone into someone they barely recognized for a while. But the uneasy feeling grew stronger each time she replayed their conversations in her mind, each time she imagined Dominic's little face and remembered the undertone of strain in Mariah's voice. By the time she decided to go to Sharon, it no longer felt like an overreaction. It felt like the only thing left to do. When she walked into Sharon's space, warm lighting, familiar smells, the soft clinking of mugs, Tessa didn't bother opening with small talk. Her words came out low and urgent, almost shaking as she tried to condense an entire storm of fear into something coherent. She told Sharon that something was deeply wrong, that they weren't dealing with the Mariah they knew, that the woman she loved had shifted into someone more distant, more brittle, as though a stranger had stepped into her skin. Tessa admitted she was terrified, not just for Mariah's mental state, but for the choices she might make if that fear, paranoia, or pressure continued to spiral. She described the way Mariah's eyes seemed haunted even when she smiled, how she talked about protecting Dominic as if there were threats everywhere that no one else could see. The more Tessa spoke, the more her voice betrayed her, cracking on certain words, falling almost to a whisper when she confessed that she was scared in a way she couldn't quite name. As if something or someone had its hooks in Mariah's mind. Sharon listened with that quiet, steady focus she'd spent years honing, her instinct as both a counselor and a mother engaged at full strength. She asked a few pointed questions, trying to tease out whether this was postpartum anxiety, lingering trauma, or something more insidious lurking behind the surface. But every example Tessa gave planted a different kind of seed. Aunt Mariah was not just overwhelmed, but guided, steered by a force or influence that she refused to fully explain. The more Sharon heard, the more she felt the same cold unease that had been living in Tessa's chest. Together they stood at the edge of a realization neither wanted to fully name, yet that whatever Mariah was tangled up in, it might already be far beyond the reach of a simple talk, and that Dominic, the innocent center of all of this, could be in serious danger. While Sharon and Tessa grappled with fear and intuition in Genoa City, Mariah drove down a deserted stretch of road with her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The night outside, the windshield pressing in like a living thing. It should have been a simple drive, the kind she'd made dozens of times before, but tonight every second behind the wheel felt like balancing on the edge of a knife. Sitting in the passenger seat beside her was Ian Ward, or at least the man she believed to be Ian, as unnervingly calm as ever, his presence filling the car with a cold, invisible weight. In the back seat, Dominic Newman, Abbott Winter's chancellor, was blissfully unaware of the psychological warfare unfolding just feet away from him. Strapped into his seat, he tapped at a game on his device, his small fingers busy, his little face lit intermittently by bursts of color from the screen. The cheerful digital sounds seemed to mock the thick tension in the front of the car. Mariah could hear Dominic's soft giggles and focused murmurs, but they barely cut through the static of her own thoughts and the steady, almost hypnotic cadence of Ian's voice. At one point, he turned his head toward her with that unnerving, knowing smile she had learned to dread long ago, and reminded her, in a tone that was both reassuring and menacing, that she knew what needed to be done. The way he said it wasn't a suggestion, it was a command disguised as a reminder, sliding under her skin like a shard of ice. He told her to stay focused on the goal, repeating the word goal in a way that made it sound less like a destination and more like a verdict. Every time she inhaled, she could feel the pressure of his expectations, the chilling sense that if she faltered, something worse would happen, something unthinkable. Her heart pounded so hard that she half expected Dominic to hear it over the sound of his game. Fear and confusion tangled inside her. Part of her clung to the idea that she was doing this to protect her son, to safeguard him from threats she had been convinced were real. Another part, deeper and quieter, kept whispering that none of this made sense, that she was being maneuvered rather than guided. As Ian spoke, his words pressed against the edges of her sanity, and for a fleeting moment, she asked herself a question she hadn't dared to fully form before. Was Ian actually there, solid and real in the leather passenger seat, or was his presence a manifestation of something broken inside her, a hallucination born from trauma, manipulation, and unhealed wounds? The dashboard lights reflected in his eyes, making them seem even more inhumanly focused, and every glance he cast her way felt like both surveillance and judgment. If he was only in her head, that meant she was spiraling into a terrifying mental fracture. If he was truly there, it meant she had allowed a predator back into her orbit and given him proximity to Dominic. Either answer was horrifying. The car hummed along the road, trees flickering by in a dark blur. The isolation of the route amplifying Mariah's sense that she was suspended between worlds, a past she couldn't escape, and a future she no longer trusted herself to reach. Ian's repetition of his instructions became a metronome of dread. He wanted her to keep driving, to ignore the doubts clawing at her, to stay committed to this path as if turning back would doom them all. Every time she hesitated, even slightly, his voice sharpened, reminding her who had laid out this plan, who understood the bigger picture. The more he spoke, the more trapped she felt, wrapped in the guilt of all the ways she believed she had failed, and the terror of failing again. Dominic, who had always represented hope and healing, now seemed caught in the crosshairs of forces he could not possibly understand. Mariah glanced briefly into the rearview mirror, seeing his reflection so small, so trusting, and her throat tightened. A wave of nausea swept through her as she realized how far from safety they really were, no matter how much Ian kept insisting that this was a necessary journey. The night seemed to press closer to the car, and even the gentle sound of Dominic's game felt distorted, thin, and distant. Then, in the middle of Ian's latest murmur, another reminder, another insistence that she keep her eyes on the road and her mind on the mission. A single word cut through everything like a blade. From the back seat, in a small, clear voice that carried an innocence no amount of darkness could fully smother. Dominic said, "Papa?" The syllables were simple, but they detonated in the cramped space of the car. Mariah's hands jerked slightly on the wheel, and Ian's sentence died abruptly in his throat. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Both adults turned their heads almost in unison, their eyes snapping toward the back seat as if pulled by invisible strings. Mariah's heart seized in her chest as she stared at her son, whose gaze was no longer fixed on his game, but lifted toward something beyond the confines of the vehicle. Something outside the frame of what she could see. His expression was not frightened, it was curious, almost relieved, as if he had recognized a familiar presence just out of view. The word Papa hung in the air, rich with implication. Dominic did not say mommy or call out in panic. He named a protector, a father figure, someone he associated instinctively with safety and comfort. The fact that he said it now, at this precise moment, in the middle of Ian's quietly coercive monologue, sent a jolt of electricity through Mariah's system. Ian, too, seemed rattled, his composure cracking in a way that was rare and revealing. His eyes flicked rapidly between Dominic and the darkness outside the windows, as if expecting someone to materialize there, as if the name itself had summoned an unseen force. Mariah's breathing grew shallow as she felt a shift, subtle but unmistakable, in the atmosphere inside the car. It was as if the balance of power had wavered for the first time since this nightmare began. She became acutely aware of the faint glow in the rear window, the suggestion of headlights in the distance behind them, drawing closer with each passing second. The idea that someone could be following them, not as a threat but as a lifeline, pierced through the fog of manipulation that had been wrapped around her. If Dominic had sensed or glimpsed something someone before either adult did, his single word might be more than a child's random utterance. It might be an instinctive response to rescue in motion. In that suspended moment, Mariah felt something stirring inside her that had been nearly crushed by fear and control, the urge to resist, to question, to fight for a different outcome than the one Ian had scripted. Her eyes darted to the mirror again, trying to catch a clearer view of what Dominic might be seeing, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it Devon Chance, some other figure Dominic associated with Papa, or was it an ambulance of fate barreling toward them, ready to rip apart the fragile illusion that Ian had built around her? The specifics remained maddeningly out of reach, but the feeling was undeniable. Someone was coming. Whether it was a literal father, a symbolic protector, or simply the hard arrival of truth, help was closing in. Ian seemed to sense it too. His posture went rigid, the easy, patronizing confidence replaced by a flicker of something like panic at the edges of his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to reassert control, to remind Mariah once more of what had to be done, but the power of his voice had shifted. It no longer filled the car completely. It now had to compete with the growing hum of an engine behind them and the quiet strength in a single word spoken by a child. In the front seat, Mariah felt her fingers tighten on the steering wheel, not out of fear this time, but out of something closer to defiance. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future did not seem entirely dictated by Ian's plan. As Dominic's gaze remained fixed on whatever or whoever approached from behind, and as that faint glow of light grew brighter in the rear window, the carefully controlled narrative began to fracture. The question now was not whether someone was coming to save Dominic, but whether Mariah would find the strength to reach for that salvation or allow herself to be dragged further into the darkness that had claimed her mind. With one small word, Dominic had shifted the ground beneath all of them, and whatever happened next would determine not only who lived and who fell, but whose version of reality would prevail when the truth finally caught up to them.